Well, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure always to be here. I'm just in the first couple of days of wandering around the country talking about this book, and so the main problem that I've been facing over and over again doing TV and radio and things is the question, how do you pronounce this odd, idiosyncratic, may have been a polite word, title, Eaarth, and what I finally hit on, what I told Kojo Namdi today, was you have to kind of channel your inner Schwarzenegger to make it work. If you say Earth, it more or less gets across both the attitude and the idea. The conceit of the title is pretty simple. 20 years ago, when I wrote The End of Nature, the first book about climate change, it was full of warnings about what would happen if we didn't make some changes pretty fast. And we didn't make many changes very fast at all, and actually much more quickly than we thought 20 years ago. The impact of all that carbon that we've been pouring into the atmosphere has become clear. The Earth that we now live in is no longer all that much like the one we were born onto. It's had significant change already. As the temperature has begun to rise, and we've pushed it up about a degree, that's begun to kick off really large-scale changes, larger than we would have guessed 20 years ago. The atmosphere holds about 5% more moisture than it did. That's an enormous change in one of the most basic physical parameters of the planet, and it explains why we're seeing around the world one record rainfall or snowfall after another. Y'all here got a slight taste of that this winter when you had snow like you'd never seen before, but that's what happens place after place. This week it was Rio de Janeiro, where they had the greatest rains they'd ever experienced, and hundreds of people died in the resulting mudslides. On and on and on. That world needs to be described, because our inability really to imagine that we're capable of changing things on that scale is one of the reasons that we are so bad at taking any real action about it. It seems somehow emotionally impossible to us that we could have grown large enough to really be changing the world, but we have. I'm not going to burden you really with too much from the first chapter or so of this book, because it is dark and hard and interesting. It's interesting to see what we've managed to make of this world. But much of the book is devoted to the question, on a new planet, how do we live? What new habits are appropriate to this planet that we've created? And the answers to that, I think, are kind of interesting too, and kind of dramatic. Above all else, I think, the habit that's been most thoroughly ingrained in us in our political lives and in many ways in our individual lives in a consumer society is that growth is the answer to almost every question that we face. If we have a tough choice, we can avoid it by figuring out how to grow our way out of it as an economy. That, I'm afraid, is the option that's not going to be possible in the future. When, in 1970, that team at MIT published that book, The Limits to Growth, that caused so much angst for so many and so much pushback, and their prediction was that sometime in the next 100 years, we would reach the point where continued growth of the sort that we were used to wouldn't be possible. They weren't able to say exactly when it would happen, but I think that they would be unsurprised at some level to see the Arctic melting, to see the deluge occurring in place after place after place, to see the very ocean, our metaphor for vastness on this planet, turned acidic, 30% more acidic, simply by the effort of the ocean to draw that carbon out of the atmosphere. If we're not, and you'll just have to take this as for the argument for the moment, if we're not going to grow our way out of our trouble, then we're going to have to think about other possibilities. And I thought I might read just for a minute from the beginning of the 3rd chapter here, where I kind of make, to me, the beginning of the argument about where I think we need to head instead. And it starts with words as much as anything else, with metaphors, with the ideas that we need to get in our head if we're going to ever get about this business of transitioning to something else. We lack the vocabulary and the metaphors we need for life on a different scale. We're so used to growth that we can't imagine alternatives. At best, we embrace the squishy sustainable with its implied claim that we can keep on as before. So here are my candidates for words that may help us think usefully about the future. Durable, sturdy, stable, hardy, robust. These are squat, solid, stout words. They conjure a world where we no longer grow by leaps and bounds, but where we hunker down, where we dig in. They're words we associate with maturity, not youth, with steadiness, not flash. They aren't exciting, but they are comforting. Think husband, not boyfriend. Here's a better metaphor. The economy that's defined our Western world is like a racehorse, fleet and showy. It's bred for speed with narrow, tapered legs. Tap it on the haunch and it accelerates down the backstretch. But don't put it on a track where the rain has turned things muddy. Know that even a small bump in its path will break its stride and quite likely snap that thin and speedy leg. The thoroughbred, like our economy, has been optimized for one thing only: pure, burning swiftness. What we need to do, even while we're in the saddle, is transform our racehorse into a workhorse, into something dependable, even-tempered, long-lasting. Won't go fast, will go long. Won't win the laurel, will carry the day. Our time's been marked by ever-increasing speed. Paddle wheeler to locomotive to airplane to rocket, Model T to Formula One. Can you imagine slower? Our time's been marked by great ups and downs, booms with the occasional bust. Can you imagine steadiness? Can you make it work in your mind? Most of all, of course, our time has been the time of bigness, the amazing, ever-steepening upward curve where things grew and then grew some more. Economies and road networks and houses, inflating until there were entire subdivisions filled with starter castles for entry-level monarchs. Stomachs and breasts and lips, cars and debts, portions and bonuses. Can we imagine smaller? This is the test of our time, both practical and psychological. How can we adjust to the fact that we're not going to get bigger, that the wind has begun to blow harder, and hence we need to lower our wind resistance, that the oil has begun to run out, and hence everything we own is suddenly larger than it should be? It's not easy to make the imaginative leap. Slow food is one thing, but shrinking is another. The pain of recession, a word that after all literally means getting smaller, has been entirely real because our economy is geared to work only with growth. By definition, the only way to escape recession is to grow larger again. On the other hand, in certain ways, our economic trouble gives us real insight into scale, makes it easier to start thinking subversive thoughts. If there is a phrase that sticks in the mind and in the craw from the last few years, it is too big to fail. Giants like AIG or Citibank had swelled to a size where if they collapsed, they could bring down the entire financial system. Loosely translated meant the government must bail us out. That's the part we debated on TV and in the op-ed columns. Should we prop them up? But the simpler meaning of the phrase was that they were too big. Anything too big to fail is by definition too big. We thought we'd spun a kind of magic that would suspend the laws of gravity. Ever since Reagan, the libertarian economist had insisted that self-interest alone was enough to hold at bay the possibility of collapse. That's why the amount of retail space per person in the U.S. doubled from 19 to 38 square feet between 1990 and 2005. It didn't make rational sense, but it made sense as long as the magic held. The spell broke late in the summer of 2008, and after that there was only poor Alan Greenspan, looking less like the master magician and more like the tired, tiny wizard behind the curtain. His belief system had turned out to be flawed, he testified to Congress. I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of organizations were such as that they were best capable of protecting their own shareholders and their equity, he said.